And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Like I said, hope you had a good weekend. Well, over the weekend, we hit the 6-month mark of Trump 2.0, and we want to talk about some of the administration's perceived successes and or failures here. Fox News correspondent Mark Meredith has more on that question. Let's listen.
Tonight, the stock market is reaching record highs. The White House calling it proof 6 months in, MAGAnomics is working.
We've had the most successful 6 months of any administration. The president has delivered on his two core campaign promises: defeat inflation and secure the homeland in record time.
Now, some of President Trump's allies want more growth faster as they pressure the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates as soon as possible. Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna is the latest lawmaker to criticize Chairman Jerome Powell. Luna wants Powell prosecuted. She claims he lied to Congress about Fed facility renovations, estimated to be over budget by $700 million.
This does not make me happy to do. Perjury is a very serious charge.
Powell has yet to respond to Luna's claims, but last week defended the renovations, writing Fed buildings are, quote, in need of significant structural repairs. Today, White House aides told Fox Powell's job is safe. Will Powell be allowed to finish his term as Federal Reserve Chairman or not?
He has no plans to fire the Fed chair, but he has been very transparent in expressing his displeasure with Jerome Powell's management of the Fed and also his policies.
Democrats say the president's first 6 months are nothing worth celebrating. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass among those critical of Trump's immigration crackdown.
If you ask me, is there anything that they have done good in terms of immigration? I don't know. I don't think so.
And as Democrats search for a new leader, today, former first son Hunter Biden is back in the spotlight, 1 year to the day after his dad dropped out of the 2024 race. In a new interview, Hunter says illegal immigrants are vital to the country.
How do you think your hotel room gets cleaned? How do you think you got food on your table? Who do you think washes your dishes?
The president once again expected to focus on both trade and tariffs as he sits down with the leader of the Philippines this week. The U.S. recently struck deals with other Pacific countries, including Vietnam and Indonesia. At the White House, Mark Meredith, Fox News.
Mark, thanks so much. Let's bring into the conversation someone who's been there for each of these 6 months to cover it all. That's, of course, Christian Datoc, our friend at the Washington Examiner. He joins me. Christian, good to see you and hope you had a good weekend here. I guess I got to ask you this. Where do you position, I guess, your reporting, your coverage now that we are 6 months in? How would you characterize it or describe it? It's been a whirlwind. That's my characterization. What say you?
Whirlwind is a pretty good word. A roller coaster, a tsunami, anything that is uncontrollable, I think, is the proper way to characterize this first 6 months of the Trump administration. And the White House is saying, look, we've had unmitigated success. It's the most successful 6 months in any presidential term ever. And I'm not so sure that's specifically the case. We still have big questions regarding the economy and the president's tariff agenda. But I will say, when it comes to immigration, I think even us in Washington doubted how hard President Trump would push his deportation agenda. He's certainly looking to make good on that promise, and that's really the one area where I can say he's knocked it out of the park, at least in terms of doing what he promised he would on the campaign trail.
Yeah, and to follow up on the kind of illegal immigration headline there, illegal border crossings, they are down to historic lows compared with where we were during the Biden administration. I would imagine the White House is touting that.
Without a doubt, and I think the president himself last week at the White House, I was at an event where he was speaking to Republican senators, I want to say on Friday night, and I think he said even he was surprised when he heard the idea that there are 0 border crossings on any given day in the summer. It's a stark change compared to the Biden era and even, quite frankly, the first Trump administration as well. So again, 6 months in, the White House is certainly happy they have those immigration numbers that they can tout.
So, Christian, you and I have talked about some of the, ensuing battles this Trump administration has had with the press, with the First Amendment, with some of these news outlets. The latest now in the form of, I guess, Trump versus the Wall Street Journal here. I just want to read this piece by Politico today. It was an exclusive to Politico. They say this: the White House is removing the Wall Street Journal from the pool of reporters covering the president's weekend trip to Scotland. Karoline Leavitt confirmed that to Politico. They say the move follows the Journal's report alleging that President Trump sent a sexually suggestive message to Jeffrey Epstein in 2003. Trump has denied the existence of the letter, and Politico has said that they have not verified that very letter. So the White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, their name Tarini Pardee, she'd been scheduled to serve as the print pool for the final 2 days of Trump's 4-day trip to his golf courses in Turnberry and Aberdeen, Scotland. But the White House, which earlier this year took over control of pool rotations from the White House Correspondents Association, removed her from the trip manifest, according to Leavitt. And now the White House Correspondents Association president putting out this statement here, saying this attempt by the White House to punish a media outlet whose coverage it does not like is deeply troubling, and it defies the First Amendment. Government retaliation against news outlets based on the content of their reporting should concern all who value free speech and an independent media. We strongly urge the White House to restore the Wall Street Journal to its previous position in the pool and aboard Air Force One for the president's upcoming trip to Scotland. The White House Correspondents Association stands ready to work with the administration to find a quick resolution here. Christian, we've seen this play out before, almost exactly, right?
More or less, Andrew. Of course, the first time we had an outlet removed from the pool entirely, we all remembered what happened. That was the Associated Press following the refusal to refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America, as dictated by President Trump's executive order changing the name within the federal government. Now, roughly 3 months later, not only is the Associated Press not restored to their usual spot in the daily rotation, they've had some of the other wire outlets, Bloomberg and Reuters, they've had to take a step back as well based on that judge's ruling. So I do not expect WSJ to have much recourse here, at least as it involves this upcoming trip to Scotland, which, again, Donald Trump will be sitting down with Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, to talk about and try and hammer through some of these remaining details on the US-UK trade deal that was announced back in May, but Wall Street Journal will not be allowed to cover. This isn't necessarily a permanent decision. Again, based on the way that AP ruling was handled, the White House legally cannot keep WSJ out of the pool in perpetuity, but it's certainly an opening salvo in this legal war we have between the White House and Wall Street Journal regarding the reporting on the president and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, Christian, though, to the Trump administration's credit, when they go after these media organizations, they have been largely successful. I mean, you can make that argument. We want to talk about ABC News, CBS, and others here. In court specifically, they have been successful, haven't they?
They have, and it's sort of an alarm bell for critics of the president. You heard it last week when CBS decided that they're going to cancel Stephen Colbert's late night show over his criticism of Donald Trump and the network for settling that 60 Minutes lawsuit. You heard people talking about, oh, comedians aren't safe or news outlets aren't safe. Anyone who criticizes this president or talks about news that he doesn't want to be spoken about, a la Jeffrey Epstein, might they be at target? It's a little frightening for us in the media. But again, I do think, based on the steps that the Trump White House stopped themselves with when it came to the handling of the AP, I'm not expecting them to take a prolonged sort of blacklisting of the Wall Street Journal again, unless they want to see them tied up in court in further legal actions. Because to your point, Donald Trump is batting 1,000 when it comes to his legal issues with media outlets in his second term. I'm not so sure he wants to let that number dip down at all.
Yeah, and just a disclaimer, the Wall Street Journal shares common ownership with Fox. Fox, though, has not independently confirmed the truth of the Wall Street Journal's reporting. Let's talk about their reporting. Did anyone in the Trump White House 6 months in think that the Jeffrey Epstein saga would yet again rear its ugly head and be somewhat of a political liability for the president? I'm going to use this kind of cliche. Did anyone have that on their bingo card 6 months in?
Definitely not, Andrew. At least no one was saying that publicly. And again, this isn't necessarily the White House, but I don't want to harp on Pam Bondi. She was one of the loudest voices, even while President Trump was back in the White House, talking about how we're going to put all the Epstein client list information out there and we're going to prosecute people. Just a few months later, it's a very different tune that Miss Bondi is singing. That being said, the president has ordered her in the DOJ to move to unseal that grand jury testimony. That request was transmitted to the federal court in Manhattan on Friday evening. And I do not think that just the publication of this information will necessarily be enough to satiate those on the right who are saying that Donald Trump has, gone back on his word regarding this one specific issue. I might be wrong. Again, I don't know what is in the grand jury testimony right now, but I have to imagine that no one in the Trump White House thought that this was going to be a nagging issue for the president the way it's proven over these last few weeks.
But how do they see it, though, in the Trump White House? A distraction or something that they need to address? Has it died down this week or no? Is it still percolating out there? Are you seeing actual fractures within his coalition because of it, or is that overblown?
It's hard to say. There are fractures online, certainly. I think right now within the White House, though, the president's staff is united. They're taking their cues from Donald Trump, and he's saying, look, we're going to let this issue, live in the past. We're moving forward and trying to look at what my quote unquote golden agenda for America looks like. But again, I'm not so sure it's necessarily up to Susie Wiles or Stephen Miller or any of the other senior aides at 1600 Pennsylvania whether or not this story goes away. Should we get new information from the grand jury publication? I do think, again, that could be a lifeline for Donald Trump. But I think it's important to point out, Democrats, while the president is trying to tamp down on this story, they're doing the best to keep it front and center on newspapers across the country. It's clear they think that this could be a problem for the president, and they're going to bang their drum for just as long as they can, fundraise off it, and try and position themselves in the best place as possible, by the time the midterms roll around next November.
So you've covered Donald Trump for quite some time, Christian. He loves to wade into so many of these cultural questions when it comes to entertainment and sports and the like here. He did that as well over the NFL team, the Washington Commanders. You're based in Washington. I'm sure you have some thoughts, some reporting on this. He wants the name Redskins to come back here, so much so that he says that he is threatening to scuttle the very deal about a new stadium for the Commanders here. Fox's Rebecca Castor has a little bit more on what Trump said about this story over the weekend. Let's listen.
The Commanders change the name back to Redskins?
I would. I wouldn't have changed the name.
That was President Trump earlier this month, saying he's not a fan of Washington's NFL team changing their name to the Commanders back in 2020. On Sunday, he doubled down, posting online the team should immediately go back to using their old name. In a follow-up post, he said he won't make a deal for them to build a stadium in Washington unless they ditch the Commanders' name.
I don't think he should have any influence on that.
Leave politics out of this right now. We just play football. What are he worried about it for?
The president also called out the former Cleveland Indians, who changed their name to the Guardians 4 seasons ago. They've been a target of Trump's criticism since the 2024 campaign.
They're in charge of a trust fund, the Cleveland Guardians.
The president claims Native Americans aren't offended by these old names, and one former player agrees.
I'm a Native American, so I'm a real Redskin and a proud one. 70 to 90% of Native American Indians, wherever you go, love the name Redskins.
Bringing a stadium back to D.C. is a top priority for Commanders owner Josh Harris. Plans call for it to be built at the site of the team's previous home, RFK Stadium. And as far as the name goes, Harris says the change is fitting.
There's more military personnel than anywhere else, so we're kind of moving forward the Commander's name, excited about that, and not looking back.
Congress transferred RFK Stadium from federal to city control late last year, so it's unclear how much power President Trump actually has over the project. From outside RFK Stadium in Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Rebecca, thanks so much. Back here with Christian. I guess that was my question, too. Does President Trump have any authority to do anything to thwart the completion of a new stadium for the Commanders? Do we know whether or not he can utilize or exercise that authority if he has it?
Short of cajoling Republicans in Congress to legislate a federal takeover of Washington, D.C., Andrew, I don't really think the president has any recourse, just because Congress passed over control of RFK Stadium to Washington, D.C. last year. And there's one thing we know: Josh Harris, the Commanders owner, and Muriel Bowser are dead set on getting this new stadium project greenlit as soon as possible. It's going to be a huge boon economically for the district, and you'd have to imagine could breathe some sports life into a city who's in desperate need of some success. It feels like forever ago that the Capitals or the Nationals won their title. So maybe the Commanders and Jayden Daniels can do it in a new stadium here in D.C. Sooner than later. That's what I'm hoping for, Andrew.
Okay, Christian Datoc, you can talk everything from politics to sports. We always appreciate it. Good to see you.